A racist comment during filming made Sammy Davis Jr. do something that shocked the entire Hollywood set. Production stopped. Millions were at stake. But what happened next changed the industry forever. It was March 8, 1962, and Sammy Davis Jr. was 3 weeks into filming Sergeants 3, a Western comedy that was supposed to be the Rat Pack's follow-up to their successful Ocean's 11. The movie had a budget of $4.2 million, making it one of the most expensive productions of the year, and United Artists had high expectations for the film's box office potential. The set at the Samuel Goldwyn Studios in Hollywood was buzzing with activity. It was a complex action sequence involving horses, gunfights, and precise choreography that had taken weeks to plan. Frank Sinatra was directing, as well as starring, and the cast included Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford alongside Sammy. The production was running on a tight schedule, and every day of filming was crucial to staying on budget and meeting the studio's release deadlines. Sammy had been having a good morning. His scenes were going well. The chemistry with his fellow Rat Pack members was natural and entertaining, and the crew seemed energized by the collaborative atmosphere that made these films so enjoyable to make. Despite the challenges of working in the desert location that they'd recreated on the studio lot, everyone was professional and focused. The trouble started during a break between takes, when the cast and crew were resetting for the afternoon's crucial cavalry charge scene. Sammy was standing near the catering table, reviewing his lines for the next sequence, when he overheard a conversation between Walter Harrison, the film's assistant director, and Mike Sullivan, the head of the transportation department, who was responsible for managing the horses and wagons used in the Western scenes. Harrison was frustrated about some logistical issues with the horse wranglers and was venting his anger in what he thought was a private conversation. "I don't know why we're having all these problems," Harrison said loudly enough for several people to hear. "Maybe if we didn't have to worry about accommodating the colored boy, we could focus on making a real movie instead of this circus." The comment hit the set like a physical blow. Sammy stopped reading his script and looked up. Several crew members who had overheard the remark glanced nervously between Sammy and Harrison, unsure how to react. The casual racism of Harrison's comment was shocking, not just for its content, but for how openly it had been expressed on a professional film set. Sullivan, apparently uncomfortable with Harrison's language, tried to change the subject. "Let's just focus on getting the horses ready for the next take." But Harrison wasn't finished. "I'm serious, Mike. This whole production would be running smoother if we didn't have to deal with special accommodations. Some people just don't belong in certain kinds of movies." The implication was unmistakable. Harrison was suggesting that Sammy's presence on the film was creating problems, and that he didn't deserve to be there. Sammy had faced racism throughout his career, but this was different. This wasn't a hostile audience member or a prejudiced hotel manager. This was a senior member of the film's production team openly expressing contempt for his participation in the movie, and doing so in front of the cast and crew. For a moment, Sammy stood perfectly still, processing what he'd heard and deciding how to respond. He could ignore it, as he'd learned to do in so many other situations. He could report it privately to Frank Sinatra and let the director handle it. Or he could do something that would risk not just this film, but potentially his entire career in Hollywood. Sammy made his choice. He walked directly over to where Harrison and Sullivan were standing, with his script still in his hand and his voice calm but unmistakably serious. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison," Sammy said, loud enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear. Did I just hear you refer to me as the colored boy and suggest that I don't belong in this movie?" Harrison's face went red. He clearly hadn't expected to be confronted directly, and he seemed to be calculating whether to deny the comment or try to explain it away. "I was just talking about some logistical challenges," Harrison said weakly. "No," Sammy replied, his voice still controlled but gaining strength. "You were talking about me. You said the production would run smoother without special accommodations for the colored boy, and that some people just don't belong in certain kinds of movies." By now, the conversation had attracted the attention of most of the cast and crew in the immediate area. Frank Sinatra, who had been reviewing camera setups with the cinematographer, noticed the commotion and started walking over. Harrison looked around nervously, realizing that his private complaint had become a very public confrontation. "Look, Sam, I didn't mean anything personal by it. I was just frustrated about some scheduling issues." "What you meant," Sammy said, "was that having a black performer in this Western was creating problems for you, and that I don't belong here. Is that correct?" The set had gone completely quiet. Crew members stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. Dean Martin and Joey Bishop had moved closer, sensing the seriousness of what was happening. Frank Sinatra reached the group and immediately understood the situation. "What's going on here?" Harrison tried to deflect. "Frank, it's just a misunderstanding. I was talking about some horse wrangling issues and—" "He called me the colored boy," Sammy interrupted, "and said the production would be better off without me." Sinatra's face darkened. He looked directly at Harrison. "Is that what you said?" Harrison tried to backtrack. "I was frustrated about some logistical issues. I didn't mean—" "Did you or did you not refer to Sammy as the colored boy?" Sinatra asked bluntly. Harrison's silence was his answer. Sammy looked around the set at all the faces watching him, cast members, crew, studio executives who had been observing the day's filming. This was one of those moments that would define not just how he was treated on this production, but how he would be treated throughout the rest of his career. "Frank," Sammy said calmly, "I can't work with people who don't respect me as a professional and as a human being. I'm going to my dressing room, and I'm not coming back until this situation is resolved." The impact of Sammy's words was immediate and devastating. He wasn't just complaining or asking for an apology. He was stopping production on a multi-million-dollar film over a matter of principle. "Sammy, wait," Sinatra said. "Let me handle this." But Sammy was already walking away from the set, leaving behind a stunned cast and crew who were trying to process what they'd just witnessed. In his dressing room, Sammy sat down and tried to think through the implications of what he'd just done. He'd walked off a major Hollywood production over a racist comment, potentially jeopardizing not just this film, but his entire career. Studios didn't like actors who caused problems, especially actors who stopped expensive productions for any reason. Meanwhile, on the set, Frank Sinatra was dealing with the immediate crisis. He called a halt to filming and gathered the key production personnel for an emergency meeting. "Here's what's going to happen," Sinatra told the assembled group. "Walter Harrison is fired, effective immediately. He'll be off this lot within the hour, and he won't be working on any other United Artists production, ever." Harrison tried to protest. "Frank, this is an overreaction. I apologize if Sam took my comments the wrong way, but you're done," Sinatra said firmly. "Security will escort you out." With Harrison removed from the set, Sinatra went to Sammy's dressing room to try to convince him to return to work. "The problem's been handled, Sam. Harrison's gone. We can get back to making the movie." But Sammy wasn't satisfied with just firing Harrison. "Frank, this isn't about one person. This is about the fact that someone felt comfortable making those comments on a professional film set. That doesn't happen unless there's an environment where that kind of thinking is acceptable." Sinatra understood what Sammy was saying. "What do you want me to do?" "I want a meeting with everyone, cast, crew, studio executives, everyone who's working on this film. I want to address what happened today, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again." An hour later, the entire cast and crew of Sergeants 3 was assembled on the main soundstage. Studio executives from United Artists were also present, having been called in to deal with what was rapidly becoming a major incident. Sammy stood in front of the group and spoke for about 10 minutes. He talked about professionalism, about respect, and about the fact that everyone on the production, regardless of their race, background, or position, deserved to be treated with dignity. "I've worked in this industry for 15 years, Sammy said. "I've dealt with discrimination and prejudice, and I've usually handled it quietly, privately. But what happened today crossed a line. When someone in a position of authority feels comfortable making racist comments in front of a group of professionals, that's not just about me. That's about all of us." He talked about the responsibility that everyone on a film set had to create an environment where talent and professionalism were the only things that mattered. "I'm not asking for special treatment," Sammy continued. "I'm asking for the same respect that everyone else here expects and deserves. And if that's too much to ask, then I don't belong here." When Sammy finished speaking, there was a long moment of silence. Then Dean Martin started applauding, followed by Joey Bishop, then Frank Sinatra. Within seconds, the entire cast and crew was giving Sammy a standing ovation. George Stevens Jr., the United Artists executive who had been called to the set, stood up and addressed the group. "Mr. Davis is absolutely right," Stevens said. "This studio will not tolerate discrimination of any kind on our productions. We're implementing new policies to ensure that every performer and crew member is treated with the respect they deserve. And we're grateful to Mr. Davis for having the courage to address this issue directly." The production resumed the next day, but the atmosphere on set had completely changed. The incident had forced everyone to confront their own assumptions and behaviors, and the result was a more professional and respectful working environment. Word of what had happened spread quickly through Hollywood. The story of Sammy Davis Jr. stopping a major production over a racist comment became industry legend. But more importantly, it marked a turning point in how studios approached discrimination on their sets. Other performers, both black and white, began speaking up about discriminatory treatment they had experienced or witnessed. Studios fearful of similar production shutdowns began implementing diversity training and anti-discrimination policies. Harrison never worked on another major Hollywood production. His career was effectively ended by the incident, which sent a clear message throughout the industry that racism would no longer be tolerated, even from senior production personnel. Sergeants 3 was completed on schedule and was successful at the box office, but more importantly for Sammy, it established his reputation as someone who wouldn't compromise his dignity for career advancement. Years later, Sammy would say that walking off the set that day was one of the most important decisions of his career. "I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself, nobody else would, and if I didn't demand respect, I'd never get it." The incident also strengthened the bond between the Rat Pack members. Frank Sinatra's immediate support and Dean Martin and Joey Bishop's backing showed that they saw Sammy not just as a talented performer, but as a friend whose dignity was worth protecting. Director Norman Jewison, who worked with Sammy on later films, said, "After what happened on Sergeant's 3, everyone in Hollywood knew that Sammy Davis Jr. was someone who commanded respect." That incident changed how black performers were treated throughout the industry. The Samuel Goldwyn Studios later named their diversity training program the Davis Protocol in honor of Sammy's courageous stand. The program became a model for other studios and helped establish standards that improved conditions for minority performers throughout Hollywood. Today, a small plaque in the studio commissary commemorates the events of March 8, 1962. It reads, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it, in honor of those who stand up for dignity and respect." The incident on the Sergeant's 3 set proved that sometimes the most important battles for civil rights aren't fought in courtrooms or on picket lines, but in everyday moments when individuals choose dignity over convenience, principle over profit, and respect over acceptance. If this incredible story of professional courage, dignity defended, and the moment when stopping a Hollywood production changed an entire industry moved you, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to remember that standing up for yourself sometimes requires risking everything you've worked for. Have you ever had to choose between your dignity and your career? Let us know in the comments about the times when principle mattered more than profit. And don't forget to hit that notification bell for more amazing true stories about courage that transforms industries.